doing my January reading wrap up. So I wanted to go over, I don't always do this every month because a lot of times I forget to do it. Go over how many books I read. So I completed 11 books. I finished 11 books. I ended up DNFing 8 books. Like, I told my husband this and he was like, damn. I'm like, I don't, if I'm not feeling a book, I don't want to linger in it if I'm not feeling it. It's better to just move on. So contemporary, I completed 10 books. I attempted 5. Of course, the attempts were all basically DNFs. Historical, I ended up completing 1. I attempted 2, and I'm currently reading 1 historical. I had said for this year I wanted to try to read at least 3 historical books a month or more to try to get through more of my historical books I have. And right now the current one I'm reading, this one here, I'm about, oh, come on. Now it's freezing on me. I swear. Technology irritates me sometimes because it'll be like, it works for you, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work for you. It stops working, and then I just get frustrated. I just get so annoyed. So I have to reboot the Kindle. It just gets annoying sometimes. So I was about maybe like 84%, I think, into that book right now. So I'm almost done with it. But I'll count that for my February reads. And for non-romance books, I had said like I wanted to read at least one book a month that is not a romance. So I ended up reading a horror book. I ended up reading that one, or I listened to it, on audio. And then I attempted to listen to this other audiobook that I had the physical version of, and I didn't like it, so I ended up DNFing it. So usually what I do is I end up saying like, well, if they're in good condition, the book is in good condition, then I will sell it, But if it's not really great, like it's maybe in like decent condition, things like that, I'll end up donating it to the library. So a book that I ended up reading basically for the rest of January. I read, this is Kendall Ryan, In My Hockey Era. I thought the cover was cute. I'm not sure if that's AI or not, but it's, a better looking cover than some of the other covers you see for contemporary. It looked nice. Unfortunately, I'll say like, I'm not really a big fan of Kendall Ryan. Like, I liked her books in the past, but these ones here, I don't know, it just seems like the heroines I'm not a big fan of. Like, they're too, I don't know, I guess you'd say feminist, like they have this really bad attitude, and then the guy's really sweet, and I kind of feel sorry for the dude because I'm like, why are you with that biatch, So this one here, we've got Lucy Quinn and Bennett Wilder. I end up giving this one a 3. So the trope is hockey and dislike to lovers. So Lucy Quinn is a huge hockey fan. So while she isn't working as an EMT, she runs a hockey podcast. One day she sees that her favorite hockey team is doing PR with Bennett Wilder, one of the hockey players on her favorite team. The PR is for a romance book club where Bennett is going to be reading a romance book. Thinking it's absolutely ridiculous, she makes her opinions known on her podcast, which catches the attention of the PR manager. She gets in touch with Lucy and convinces her to join the book club with Bennett. Lucy reluctantly agrees, and she meets up with Bennett, and they bicker back and forth, end up having an attraction to each other. I said, this story was okay, but unfortunately I wasn't a fan of Lucy. I really felt like she had a crappy attitude, and I honestly didn't see the appeal. I didn't feel a connection with the two characters, and I didn't feel enough yearning or build-up. Also, the third act breakup was absolutely ridiculous, where Lucy finds out that Bennett was married for 2 years and got divorced. She acted like it was a huge breach of trust, and I was like, what? That's it? I said, it's not like the dude cheated on her or had a secret child. Plus, if she really wanted to delve into his history, then why didn't she Google the guy? I'm sure she could have found out about his former marriage there. It wasn't worth the breakup. It was just stupid, where I was like, you're going to go and be upset with the guy because he was previously married and he didn't explain to you that he was previously married? So I'm like, I was like, this is what you're upset over? You're upset over that? When you could have did a simple Google search, and I'm sure because he's a professional NHL player, they'd have all kinds of deets on this guy, you know? Come on. Yeah, it seemed far-fetched to me. And then also, like, for someone who, you know, Kendall Ryan, who is a romance writer, you know, she created this character that was just shallow and was like, oh, all of these romance books are lame and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't know. It really didn't help her likeness, like likability, for the fact that she was like prejudging romance novels, you know? Like, I used to do the same thing when I was younger. Like, before I started reading romance, I did the same thing where I prejudged the genre, and it was like, oh, look at these cheesy like covers. And now I'm like, I wish we still had the cheesy covers because they told more of a story, you know, on the cover. So I prejudged them myself until I got into the books and actually started to enjoy them. But I just really disliked her when it came to like her attitude when it came to the romance genre. And then she was like getting all up in her feels about, oh, like these TikTok people, and, you know, she just had a really bad attitude. And I could see, like, yeah, you don't want people who are what I would call tourists, you know? You don't want people who are tourists in the sport, who are just there to just Google the guys. Like, there's even women, like, online who will call the hockey rink, they'll call it a what was it called again? A male aquarium, something like that. And I'm like, okay. I just think, you know, if women don't like when males judge them for their things, then maybe women shouldn't do the same thing. Just a thought, you know? So yeah, sometimes I get kind of annoyed where women will be like, you know, oh, you know, these guys, you know, they're saying this about women. And I'm like, but what are you saying about a guy? You know, it's like, you know, it's kind of hypocritical to go and complain about what men say, but then you kind of like do the same thing. It's like, you know, when women get upset when males objectify women, women do the same thing. Women objectify men. How many times have you heard the thing of like, oh, the guy's wearing gray sweatpants? You're objectifying a male by stating he's wearing gray sweatpants. We all know what you're looking at, lady. Like, I just recently had talked to my husband about this, and I told him how, you know how they say, like, men are always constantly looking at women's boobs, and it's like, because that's a biological response. You know, you're going and you're being mean to these men, but it's a biological response to look at a woman's boobs. What do we do as women, ladies? What do we do? What do we do? We constantly check out men's junk. We constantly look down. We do it. Don't say you don't do it. Don't lie. Unless you're a lesbian and you're not interested in penis. Anybody who's like a heterosexual female, we always check out the guy's junk. You know, it's a biological response. So for me, I'm like, don't go and blame men that do this and you do the same thing. You're a hypocrite. So with her character, she just really frustrated me with a few things. It was almost like, I hate to use the term because it gets used on me and I hate the term, but she kind of gave off that like pick me energy of like, well, see, I'm into the sport because I'm actually into the sport, not because I'm attracted to the male players. I'm actually into the sport. I actually care about the sport. And so I kind of like, I just didn't like her attitude, you know, where I'm like, girl, you know, whether or not these females are interested in the sport, you are bringing more attention to the sport, you know, even though I could say, you know, yeah, girl, if you're just looking at the guy in his like uniform, you know, which if you're around hockey players, those uniforms stink. They smell so bad. Unless they're getting professionally cleaned, guys, men's gear, it stinks. It smells so bad. It smells like a gym locker. It just, mm-mm. And there's some guys out there who are like, they're superstitious about their gear and they don't wash it for like the whole season. So they reek. They reek. And so, yeah, I'm like, to me, I'm like, you know, there'll be women out there who will ogle the guys because the guys are doing like these pre-stretches before they start playing. Because you can really tweak something because you're wearing like how many pounds of gear, you know, to help protect you. Especially the hockey players, I've put on like, or not hockey players, the goalies. I've put on goalie gear before. I've actually put it on and tried to play in goalie gear because my one uncle, he used to play goal. And so I actually put his gear on. I'm like, man, this shit's heavy. How do you like work in this stuff? It's like, it's so like restrictive in your movements. And then, you know, you got to skate in it. And it's like, how the heck do you do this? And you know, I respect the people who are actually on the ice who are wearing all this gear and they have to like back and forth and then they're getting checked into the boards and, you know, all that stuff. So, I mean, it could be a pretty rough sport. You can get like cut with the blade if you're not careful, you know? So it could be a pretty rough sport. And so I got annoyed with her attitude. And then also like when it came to like the romance in the book, I felt like I didn't feel like the build up really great with it. And it kind of felt like more of like a copy and paste romance. It just really didn't like appeal to me, you know, like it wasn't really good. And then after that book, I was like, well, it could be a one-off, you know, I'll attempt to try to read, you know, another book. So I tried reading this one here by Kendall Ryan. This is the second book in the series, The Book Club Boyfriend. I ended up DNFing this one. So I said, what is with the heroines being nasty biatches? I said, what man in his right mind wants that? I said, DNF'd after a couple pages. She kind of gave off this like attitude. Again, another female where she's giving off this really nasty attitude and like kind of has this like, oh, well, I'm not looked at great because I'm a female and I have to work even harder as a female. And I'm just like, give me a break. Give me a break. I get tired of that whole rhetoric of like, oh, well, I'm a female and I have to work 3 times harder than a man because I'm a female. And I'm like, you do realize that women have privilege, right? Females, we have privilege. We very much do. So I just get annoyed with it. And it's like, yeah, are there people in the workforce who could be dicks? Of course. But I found that with both sexes. I found that with some males are hard to work with, but then there are some females that are hard to work with. It all depends on the person, you know? So I'm not going to go and automatically judge a man that I'm working with and say like, oh, well, he's judging me based on I'm a female. No. I've actually found that there are more males that appreciate my skills when it comes to work at a job than females. You know, like females kind of like put you on a like, most women, we put each other like on a higher standard. So we can be very hard on the other, you know, on the same sex, you know, on our sex. We could be very hard on them when it comes to work and all that stuff. Where with a man, you know, we tend to be a little bit more, I don't know, lax or, like, you know, when it comes to working with men, I find them to be a little bit more helpful, and they give me less of an attitude, you know? And I'd say males tend to be more fun to work with than females. Females tend to be more serious about it, or I've had the opposite effect where I've had women who I've worked with who make me do all the work. And then they're like, I'm just a girl. I can't do this. And I'm like, girl, be so fucking for real. Be so for real right now. You are just being lazy. You want someone else to do your job. That's what it is. I've run into females that are like that, and they're like, oh, I'm late. Can you just forget that? That in fact that I'm late? And I'm like, okay. Yeah, I get annoyed with that very quickly. So when it came to like this one here, the heroine just was annoying me because she's like, you know, I have to work 3 times harder than a man. And I'm like, okay. She automatically kind of gave me the ick. And I was like, girl, I do not like you. I do not want you for this hero. He deserves better than you. So I was like, nope, not working with this. And I was like, what is with Kendall Ryan's heroines where they're just these nasty biatches? I'm like, yeah, I just like, no. And I'm like, I'm not going to bother with any more books from that author, honestly. So I ended up delving into the next book, and I did like this one. This was Noelle Adams' Carpool. This is part of the Milford College series. So this one here, we got Marcus Green, he is 32, and Jennifer Rowley is 28. So Jennifer Rowley and Marcus Green have known each other for years, living in their small town called Sterling. Both of them commute to work for a small college. One day, Jennifer's car has issues, so she heads over to her local mechanic, and he tells her that he can work on it for cheap, but only on days when he isn't busy with his business, just to save her from having to put like $2,000 on her credit card. So she agrees to it, but it puts her in a pickle of a situation because now she's out of a car in order to get to work. So she reluctantly asks Marcus if he can take her to work every day because he works there as well. So it would make things easier, and he agrees to it. So the more time they travel back and forth, the more they get to know each other. And eventually their feelings progress to the point where they start, you know, getting, you know, having the horizontal hustle. So this was a cute story because you could see how Jennifer didn't want to form romantic feelings for Marcus because she thought he could never have those feelings for her, since the fact that he's never been in a romantic relationship before. So she didn't want her heart to get stomped on. I said these two characters held a lot of internal feelings for each other through most of the book until finally they learned how to communicate to each other better. I said it was a sweet romance. And so with this one here had it to where she's known him since he was a teenager, since she was like around 12 and he was like 16. She's known him, and he always kind of was like a troublemaker, and he got into trouble and caused like a lot of like different issues and stuff. So her grandmother always told her, like, kind of keep away from that, you know, keep away from that boy. You know, he's kind of trouble. But, you know, he kind of grew up and matured, and he actually stayed behind with his parents to help them on the farm. With his other siblings, they had, like, moved off and moved away. So he kind of stayed behind. And he said the reason why he stayed behind is because he felt guilty for being kind of like a pain in the ass kid when he was growing up, you know, and he put a lot of stress on his parents. So he said he felt guilty about it. So that's why he stayed behind to help them out and all that stuff, which I think is good to, you know, it's good to help out your parents, you know, when they get older, you know. There's only so much that they can do. When they get to a certain point, you know, they need assistance, you know. The elderly, you know, get to the point where they, you know, can't do it on their own anymore, you know. And that's the bottom line of it. So I'm glad he stayed behind. And it showed, like, as a character, like, he matured and he grew up and he realized that, you know, how he was as a teenager, he was just stupid, which, you know, is pretty typical. It happens, you know. It happens, you know, like when you're a teenager, you can get, you know, you can be really stupid and make a lot of stupid mistakes. But that's the whole point, is like, you live and you learn, and you learn to say, you know what, I'm not going to make that mistake again, you know? Sometimes you got to learn those lessons, you know, even if it's a hard lesson. So I did enjoy the book a lot, you know, like you could see like he still kind of like was, you know, like you could see like he kind of like was messing with her. He kind of messed with her and kind of like stuff like that, and you know, kind of like push her buttons and everything, which I thought was funny. That he pushed her buttons and everything. I like a guy who could tease really well. Um, you know, I think it's fun to like have somebody who kind of teases you back and forth, like a good banter. I like a good banter when I can when I'm with somebody, you know, who could like banter back and forth with me. Obviously not arguing, but like, you know, bantering, you know, converse and everything, you know, have good conversations, you know, and like joke around and stuff. That's what I like. I like when you can joke around with somebody, and they're not all like serious and have a stick up their ass, you know? So yeah, it was fun. It was cute. And, you know, she was more of like, you know, more of the serious one. He was more of like, you know, he kind of like, he's like, hey, this is a job for me. I'm not going to go and like, you know, he didn't treat his job as like, oh, I need to be serious about it. He took it serious when he needed to, but he also was like, hey, this is just a job for me, you know, kind of thing. So I did like that, where she was kind of like more of a, you know, strict with her job and everything like that, to try to take it more seriously and things like that. Um, so yeah, I did enjoy it, and seeing their, you know, like her reluctance to like get with him and show like that she had feelings for him and stuff like that. And they were kind of like doing more of like a friends with benefits thing for a little bit, and then, you know, they started to like obviously develop feelings for each other and everything. And he was sweet. He was a sweet, I liked him. He was sweet to her. And you could see how much he cared about her, you know? So yeah, it was sweet. I like that one. And the next one I ended up delving into is the same series. So this is Office Mate. And this one, I love this one. This one was so sweet. Because of the characters and how they were, like I said, I love banter. And I kind of like, it depends on the opposites attract to me. But this one here was like an opposites attract. So we got Beck Wilson and Evan Jones. I gave this one 5 stars. So Beck is a history professor at a small college called Milton. That's basically what, you know, the whole series is called. And she's had an office to herself for 2 years. But with the small funding they have there, she has to get stuck with a new professor of English called Dr. Evan Jones. She first meets him in her office when he is taking her poster of Lord of the Rings down, and it makes her very annoyed. Evan Jones comes off as reserved, not friendly, and stick to his work. He is also writing a book, which he does in the office as well. Throughout the weeks of being in the same office, they don't say much to each other, but the more time she spends around the good-looking professor, the more she's interested in getting to know him. So Evan is like a locked safe. He doesn't show a lot of emotions, but the more time he spends around Beck, the more you could see the cracks in his personality come out. One day while watching The Lord of the Rings at Beck's house, she kisses him and their sexual relationship begins. Like he was like, I didn't think that you were, you know, interested in me. And I like kind of like that reserved shyness of him, where he wasn't sure about like, you know, if he could, you know, kind of like show that he was attracted to her. And so she was kind of like the one who kind of made the first move. Sometimes you have to do that, you know. Sometimes, you know, he may be more gentlemanly and more reserved, and it's like, maybe I should make the first move. And he's kind of like more shy about it. Sometimes you got to make the first move. As long as you can tell with the signs like he's interested, yeah. But, you know, if he doesn't look interested, don't even bother, you know. So I really enjoyed this romance. I said one thing I love about Noelle Adams / Claire Kent is she creates a lot of characters that don't show their emotions on the outside, especially when it comes to male characters, because usually they are in the female's perspective when it comes to like the storyline. Usually it's in the female POV. So you think that the men don't have any emotional depth to them, but they come to surprise you right when you need them to. So everyone was very reserved and didn't show his emotions on the outside because his parents would use it against him. So I felt a lot of empathy for him. I said once he opens up to Beck and he explains how his mother and father are, you could see the relationship blossom and become stronger. And you could see that Evan didn't want to hurt Beck. He also felt self-conscious. I said, these characters do fall for each other very quickly because it's a novella, so it tends to happen. I said, even though they were almost opposites, they understood each other on a deeper level. And so that's what I think I really liked about that one, is that they did really connect with each other, like, emotionally. You definitely could see that they did that. I got something in my eye. It's driving me crazy. My kids will be like, ew, because I'll go and be like, hey, hold still. And they're like, get away from me with your spit. But I used to be the same way, like with my mom. She used to do that to me. She'd go, hey, come here. And I'm like, get away from me. I don't want to smell your spit. So I used to do the same thing. But I'm like, well, do it to your own face. I'm like, it's your own spit on your own face, So, anyways, the next book I ended up reading, it wasn't as enjoyable. This was the third book in that Milford College series called Single Dad. I gave this 3 stars. So it said it's got Maxworth Wentworth III. That's his name, Maxworth Wentworth III. And Katrina Pierce. So it's a single dad. The daughter, her name is Frederica, but she goes by Rika. She likes that name, even though her dad calls her Freddie. So Katrina works at a college, and she's attracted to the new teacher who is discussing art. He's kind of like not really a professor, but he's more of like, almost like a liaison to the college and stuff like that. So he does graphic art as his main job. Like, when he's home and stuff, he does graphic art. So I said, this book was okay, but it failed to impress me. I said, I felt like Max came off too strong to his attraction to Katrina because he didn't even know her personally. All he did was see her walk past his classroom, and that's what made him lust after her. It just made him look really shallow, that his focus was more on her looks and less on her personality. I could say that Katrina did the same thing by being attracted to Max, but she also wasn't pursuing him like he did to her. I said, again, I felt like he came off too strong right at the beginning of their introduction. Then when it came to Katrina, she came off as really insecure, and the third act conflict was just really weak, in my opinion. Yeah, it was kind of like really weak because of the fact that he has a daughter with his ex-wife, and the ex-wife doesn't really have a great relationship with her daughter. Like, it's kind of like, I'd say, more strained because the mother, her main focus is on her career. And so she wants to obviously care more about her career than hanging out with her daughter and things like that. So I don't know. To me, I'm like, I can't relate with that. I want to spend as much time with my kids as I can, because one day they won't want to spend that time with you, or they're going to be busy with their own lives. So I try to spend as much time with my kids as possible when it comes to that. And honestly, it's like, I can understand, like, you respect your career, you love your career, that's fine. But you also need to remember that these employers, they only see you as a worker. They don't give a shit about you as a person, So the fact that, you're going to care about this career, but this company could just lay your ass off after how many years, and now where are you going to be? Where with your family's your family, If you have a good relationship with your family, that I think is more important than a career. But that's just me. So with the mother, you didn't see her, you don't really know anything about her. You just heard from his character, Max, that she cared, his ex-wife cared more about her career than, their marriage and, the daughter and everything. So the daughter spent more time with her dad and stuff. And so there were times when he was doing his, work at the college, and so his daughter would be at the library reading books. She very much was a book nerd, like introvert. And so he worried about her, like, you know, being introverted. And so what's her name there? I forget her name. Katrina. So Katrina, she was part of the library, working at the library, and so she ended up befriending Rika, and she didn't know that Max was her father, was Rika's father, until like toward the end of the book, because whenever he would discuss his daughter, he'd always call her Freddie, you know, and so the girl went by the name Rika. So of course she's not putting two and two together. And so I like the relationship between Katrina and Rika, because it's like you could see like they kind of like Katrina kind of like, she kind of saw herself in this young lady, you know, and was like, oh, you know, she's kind of like me, you know, she's in the books and everything. And she had actually gave advice to Rika and told her like, oh, hey, you like these books? You might like these ones here. And so she ended up like getting like recommendations from the librarian, you know. And so it's like, it was really cute. You could see like they had this little like cute little like friendship and all that stuff, you know, as much as you can have like with a child, you know, with like a teenager and all that stuff, and you being an adult, you know, it's kind of like almost like a mentorship kind of thing, you know. And so you could see like, you know, Rika obviously liked her, you know, you know, as the librarian and everything like that. She was really nice. So you could see that relationship. Thought that was really cute. And then, you know, the relationship with Max and Katrina, he very much was like telling her at the beginning, like, you know, can we kind of like be more of like, kind of treat it more of like a friends with benefits type of relationship, for the fact that, you know, he said his main focus was going to be his daughter. You know, he's like, I want, you know, my daughter comes first, which in a way I can understand. But you also need to be able to stretch yourself in a way to where you're not abandoning or putting on the back burner the relationship that you have with this person, you know. You have to be able to juggle the two, you know. Like when it came to when I met my you know, husband, you know, then boyfriend, when I met him at the time, I knew he had a son, and his son was a teenager. And, you know, I had, you know, my children were young at the time, like really young, toddlers, you know, and a baby. And when I met him, you know, I had told him, like, you know, my daughters will always come first for me because, you know, that's my main focus. I'm the one that brought them into this world, so I have to be the one that's responsible for them. But also, you know, I have to make time for him as well, you know. And so we took it slow with our relationship because we both came out of like bad former relationships. Like his relationship, you know, he was married for how many years to, you know, a biatch, and, you know, she didn't treat him well. You know, she very much like mentally abused him and, you know, made it everything about his, you know, his fault and everything. I've met the woman. She's not a good lady. She's very fake. She's very fake, very much about herself, you know. And also, like, the more I'm around the woman or know of her, the more I don't like her, especially because, you know, her relationship with her son, you know, my stepson, he does not have a good relationship with her either. So, I mean, you know, if two people here are having a bad relationship with one person, it might be that person. That's the issue. So, and, you know, with my husband, he never wanted to talk badly about her in front of, you know, his son. He always would be like, you know, he'd be like, so-and-so, you know, I don't want to say my stepson's name. I'll just say like Blake, you know. You know, he's like, you know, Blake, you know how your mom is. You'd be like, you know how your mom is. And then, you know, Blake would be like, yeah, I know how she is. So, so for me, it's like, yeah, he knows how his mom is. So, I mean, we don't have to tell him how his mom is. He already knows. So, with my relationship, when it comes to my stepson, I try to tell him, I say, you know, dude, I said, you don't have to call me mom. I said, I'm not your mother. You don't have to call me that. You could just call me Brandy or call me B. That's fine. And so I would tell him, like, you know how your mom is? And I said, when it, I know she buys him like clothes all the time. And he's like, I don't like these clothes. And he's like, he's in his 20s, he's in his 20s and she treats him like a fucking baby. And so for him, it's like, he gets annoyed with it. So I tell him, I'm like, dude, I said, I know that, you don't have a great relationship with your mom. And I know like you don't like hanging out with her all the time and everything. But I said, sometimes you gotta appease your parent, and kind of like deal with certain situations, stuff like that, hanging out with them and stuff like that, just to kind of like make them feel better. And I said, and I know you don't like getting these clothes, but I said, you don't have to keep them. I said, you don't have to keep them. I said, if you want to get rid of them, we could donate them to Goodwill or the Salvation Army. We could donate the clothes and just get rid of them. I said, you don't have to keep them in your closet just because your mom buys them for you. I said, dude, you're in your 20s. I said, you are not a little kid anymore. I said, you live with us all the time. You only go and visit her. I said, she doesn't need to see that and know what your closet looks like. I said, you're the one that controls your room. You control your room. You control what's in there. And you control like what you want in your closet and you don't want in your closet. I said, if you don't like these clothes, you don't like wearing these clothes or these jackets or these types of pants, you don't have to wear them. You could just donate them. She's the one that's wasting the money by forcing you to have these clothes that you don't even want. Like, this is something I had told my grandmother. Like, I even told him, I said, my grandmother would try to buy me these clothes and I'd be like, Grandma, I don't like that style. I'm like, why don't you just, if you want to buy me stuff that I like, because then I'll wear it, if I'm going to wear these clothes, that it's going to be my style. It's going to be things I like to wear, not stuff that you like to wear. I'm like, I'm not a girly girl. I don't like to wear dresses. I don't like to wear, skirts. I don't feel comfortable in that stuff. I feel comfortable in jeans and t-shirts. That's what I've always felt comfortable in. And that's what I continue will do. Maybe if I want to change my style, I'll do it. So for me, it's like, you could have like a certain relationship with like a potential step child without like butting in, and so that's what I try to do when it comes to that. So when it comes to the book, like, I could understand Max's reasoning of like he wanted to put his daughter first because he felt like his ex wasn't putting their daughter first. I get it. But also on the other hand, like, he kind of gave her a little bit of mixed signals when it came to their relationship and stuff. And so that kind of was annoying, is that he gave her like these mixed signals. And then she, like I said, she had a lot of like self-esteem issues where she felt like she wasn't good enough, and I was like, oh girl, you've got to like pick yourself up and not be that way. And so very much like their feelings were kind of like wishy-washy when it came to like, when it came to their like communication and all that stuff. So it just kind of bothered me. It kind of bothered me, so I wasn't really a huge fan of it, because it just, and then like I said, the third act, like, separation was kind of stupid because, she was all like, I don't know, it felt like really weak writing to me, or weak, like, third act. So I was like, I wasn't really a big fan of it. I just felt like it could have been handled better with, like, better communication, So anyways, the next book I ended up reading, a part of that series, was Secret Santa. This one was another one. I gave it a 3. So we got May and Jeremy. It's his best friends to lovers, which is always a hard trope for me, because I'm always like, why have you been best friends for years? And then all of a sudden you're attracted to each other. That's kind of, I don't know. To me, I'm like, wouldn't you always have that attraction, you know? For Jeremy, it was like he was attracted to her for years. It was May that needed to get her head out of her ass. So I said, this is not my favorite trope, but I still try to give it a chance. So May and Jeremy have been friends since high school, when Jeremy was assigned as her tutor for math. Jeremy is very closed off and not really affectionate. He was abandoned at 5 years old by his mother and raised in foster care. May brings him out of his shell. I said, now May and Jeremy are in their late 20s and are both working at Milford College. May has to plan a Secret Santa, and she starts getting her gifts in her office, but the gifts are definitely over $5. And she believes they're from a man named George. So she starts going on dates with George, but the more time she sees the man, the more she realizes she has deeper feelings for Jeremy, you know, her best friend. So this book was okay, but honestly, it was the wishy-washy heroine that annoyed me. She kept having doubts of getting together with Jeremy, and I was thinking to myself, like, why would you question this? He's your best friend. You think he's good looking. You do everything together. So what is the issue, girl? I was like, that's what annoyed me. I was like, why are you being wishy-washy when it's like, you guys do everything together. He's your best friend. You're attracted to him. So why hold off? Oh, because I'm afraid of losing the friendship. If you guys really were true friends, even after the break, you know, like say if you broke up and you're like, you know what, we weren't really good as a couple, but we're better as friends, you could still have that friendship. You know, maybe it might be strained for a little bit, but I think you can kind of get back to like that relationship again of like being friends, especially if it's like it just didn't work out as a couple. You could still talk to each other, you know? So I said, she kept being in her head and it frustrated me. I said, hence why I ended up giving it this 3 stars. It was the heroine that just really, really frustrated me because of that, because she kept being in her head and just constantly questioning it. And I was like, girl, stop it. Especially him, like you could see like how much he was attracted to her, but he also wanted to hold himself back because he didn't want to scare her away, you know? And also like I knew from the beginning, like when she was getting these gifts from her Secret Santa, it was from him. I knew it. I knew it was from Jeremy. Like, especially some of the gifts. I'm like, this is like stuff like that, you know, this person. This is not like one of those like everyday Secret Santa or white elephant kind of gifts, like where it's like, oh, maybe they'll like that. Like, oh, I gave you a candle. That's kind of like more of a thing like anybody could get a candle, you know, like anybody could take a candle. But like he was leaving her like a little jewelry box and earrings, things like that. That's more intimate, you know? That's more of an intimate thing. So it's like, this person knows you, girl. How would you think it would be the other dude? You know, it makes no sense to me. She was just completely oblivious. And it's like, how do you not see that your best friend is in love with you? He loves you. He just can't express it that often. He's not very good at expressing his feelings because, you know, him being abandoned as a child and being put in foster care, that's going to really mess with you mentally because you're thinking you're unloved, you're unwanted. This person didn't love you enough to keep you. That's heartbreaking. That is honestly heartbreaking, you know? If I, you know, I'm the type of person, like, if I had the money, I would adopt children. You know, I would adopt some children from foster care because, you know, all kids need parents. Not every person who becomes a parent is a good parent, but all kids need a parent and need a good parent. This is why I say, just because you physically can have children doesn't mean you should. So that's why for me, like when I, you know, knew I was pregnant, I was like, well, I want these children, you know, so I have to be responsible for them. That means I have to do the best I can to be a good parent to them, you know? So, so yeah, when it came to Jeremy, I very much, felt for his character. I very much empathized with him, or sympathized with him, because of him growing up and kind of like having to keep to himself and everything, and her kind of opening him up, his feelings and stuff. So that's why it kind of like annoyed me with her, where I was like, girl, that man is so devoted to you. How could you think that, that, oh, I don't think I could be with him? Girl, come on. Come on now. Come on now. That's why it always kind of frustrates me when it comes to like the friends to lovers trope. It's not always done well. It can be a hard trope to do. So yeah, that one was a 3 to me. It was fine. It wasn't great. So the next book I ended up listening to this on audio. It was only like 2 hours and something minutes. It got through it like within a day. It's pretty quick. This was creepy as F, So this was James Herbert. This is The Rats. This one here was, one word to describe this book, terrifying. Honestly terrifying. So there's these infected rats have invaded London, eating their way through its residents. Yeah. They started the weakest of the residents, so you could honestly imagine what the weakest residents are without going into detail. Yes. Ugh. I said, and they work their way through the city, getting bolder and bolder as they go. Now, this is a part of a series. I'm not sure if I want to read the rest of the books in the series, because the ending's kind of like more bittersweet kind of thing, where you're like, oh, ew. 'Cause these rats were essentially like these mutated rats that obviously whatever this scientist or whatever it is found and decided to bring back to their country, their home country. And I'm like, why would you do that? No. So I said this was very creepy and, like I said, terrifying, especially because rats can overtake a city very fast based on their breeding speed. Yeah, rats and mice, they can, how do you say it? Gestate, I can't say it. The time frame of when they're pregnant, when mice and rats are pregnant is very short. It's shorter time. So they can have babies like very quickly. So they could spread very fast. And usually having multiples too. So I said, especially if their infestations don't stay managed, they can overtake a city or a town very quickly. So I said, after this book, I will never look at a rat the same way again. I said, this book has multiple POVs, some of the victims being eaten. You're in the person's POV as they're getting eaten. And some of the other people dealing with the rats. So some readers may not like the multiple POVs, but the main POV was a teacher named Harris. He was the one that was the main character who was dealing with a lot of the rat infestation. So the book is basically what I would call a warning to cities that do not or will not control their rodent population. Besides the fact that it could be a little far-fetched and say like these rats could overtake humans, but there were some that were bigger. They were huge. They were more mutated and all that stuff. That I would say could be a possibility that could happen, From what I'm understanding, I just recently heard about squirrels, how squirrels are becoming more aggressive, and squirrels are becoming more meat eaters, where before they're more of like they do with fruit and nuts and things like that, right? They've been showing more aggression to eating meat and eating different things like birds and stuff like that. So there is that possibility that there could be some kind of weird mutation with animals that could get to the point where, especially with rats, not only rats can like mutate, and there could be a possibility they could grow, you know. They could get, I mean, look at some of the fish that have come from areas when they've had radioactive activity and stuff like that. You see these fish that have like 3 eyes and all this. It's just weird stuff, you know. So I mean, there's a possibility that could happen to rats. Plus, also, if you're not careful, rats carry diseases like typhoid, things like that. And you could have a typhoid epidemic in your city or town, and it's going to wipe out a lot of people. So with this one here, you had it to where these rats were infected with this like disease, and within 24 hours, these people were dying. If they managed to survive the rat attack, they were dying of the disease. So they ended up having to create this antidote that was kind of like essentially a vaccine. And so you would maybe get sick, but you wouldn't die. And so Harris ended up discovering this infestation due to this little boy that ended up getting bitten. The next day, the boy ended up dying. And so now he's like finding out the boy who got bit by this rat died from the rat bite. And so he ends up seeing more stuff happening. And so he's got a girlfriend that lives with him. And so they're kind of like having their little relationship. And then all of a sudden he's kind of getting in the middle of like all this stuff that's happening. And so he ends up like being a part of like helping out this military and all that stuff, and the people who are involved with like controlling the city and stuff like that, the government officials and all that stuff, end up being involved in that, try to help kill off these rats and stuff. But you also had other perspectives too. Like there was at the beginning this man who was obviously a gay man. And this is during the time of like, obviously gay acceptance wasn't like it is now, I'd say, even though gay acceptance is going down because of different things happening. I think when you push it too much on people, it could have an opposite effect. I'll just say that. So during this time frame, you have this man who got in a relationship, and the wording was, I kind of had an issue with it, where he said that he was sleeping with this boy. I don't like the term boy, because when I think of the term boy, I think of a child. And I think what this person was referencing in the book, I don't believe the person was an actual boy. I believe the male that he slept with was probably like, maybe he was like late teens, early 20s, around there. Like for me, I could go and I could say to my stepson, oh, he's a kid. But to me, I'm like, he's not a kid. He is an adult. He's in his early 20s. But to me, I kind of consider him as a kid because I'm older than him. I'm how many years older than him? I am old enough to be his mother, you know, technically. If you want to be technical, I'm old enough to be his mother. So that's when I refer to like, oh, this kid, he's an adult. So I think that might have been the case when it comes to this book. At least I hope so, you know, because the gay man we were in his perspective, and he was saying how he fell in love with this boy and their relationship didn't work out. And I say because he obviously was an adult because he was working at a job, you know. This young man he got involved with was working at the job. So he obviously has to be, I'm assuming, an adult to work that job. So that's why I said, like, the wording was, it was kind of weird when he said boy. And I was like, that's kind of weird. But I'm assuming, obviously, when you're working a job, this particular job, you have to be an adult. So obviously he was an adult, but he was obviously a young adult. Where the older man, I'm assuming he probably was in his maybe 50s. So when you're getting involved with a young man who is discovering he's obviously gay, and you have an older gentleman who's been hiding his gay status, his homosexuality, um, it can be, more of a difficult situation, obviously. And so during that time, the young man had obviously said, like, he didn't want to deal with that, because it ended up coming out that they were discovered that they, were gay having sex. And it was more obviously frowned upon during that time. And so the older gentleman ended up having this relationship that was very short-lived, and he got rejected from the young man, and he ended up basically ended up his relationship to where he got into the addiction of alcohol. And that was basically his demise, was him being an alcoholic and more passed out in a drunken stupor and getting attacked by rats. What a sad, sad ending for that man. It was over fairly quickly, too. I will just say that. So we had that small perspective at the beginning, and then it went into the perspective of Harris for a little bit, where he was a teacher. And then it went into another perspective where there was these people on a train getting attacked. And then we had another perspective where there was people at a movie theater. So like I said, you had multiple POVs for like some were very short time. And then others, were during this part of the book. But like I said, you had the main protagonist who was the man fighting off, who was a teacher. And so it was kind of like I said, it might confuse you a little bit because you had so many different POVs at that time. And sometimes, like I said, you were in the mind of like the victim, and other times you were in the head of the person who was trying to solve this rat issue. So it was, like I said, very creepy, very creepy. And I was like, ugh. I will keep the book for now. I may end up like donating it, selling it. But I did enjoy it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was an interesting read. I will just give it that. So I tried getting into this book called Hide that I ended up purchasing. I purchased this one last year. And it's supposed to be a short horror story. Fortunately, I did not care for this. I ended up DNFing it. Not that long into the book. There was like multiple things I was irritated in this book. So we got Hide by Kiersten White. So this one here was a battle of the entitled influencer. I said this was boring. So it essentially was these people are, they all basically get chosen to be in this abandoned amusement park for like, I don't know how many days a week or whatever it is. And they have to be the winner. Whoever wins the game of hide and seek, whatever it is, ends up winning money and all that stuff. So you had how many people who were like influencers, and they're really annoying. And I was just like, this is annoying. And then you have the main protagonist, who was basically the narrator. And you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to want to root for this person because they're not an influencer. And they obviously are having a harder time, So you're assuming they're probably going to be the one that survives it, So I kind of felt like, okay, this is probably already predictable. I'm already predicting the main protagonist is probably going to be the one that survives this. And then the author decided to name these 2 characters the same name. And it was like, I think the name Eva or Ava or whatever it is, both these women named Ava. And then the author decides to like, oh, I'm going to call this one Shaved Ava, because the girl has like really short hair and all that stuff. And obviously it's kind of like more butchy. And And so she decides to name the character like Shaved Ava. And I was like, why? That's so stupid. Why create two characters with the same name? It's just confusing. And so I wasn't really feeling the book. I think I got maybe like a couple of chapters in, and I was like, I'm not really feeling this. So I ended up DNFing it because it just was annoying me. So yeah, that was pretty much it for this one here. I'm going to try to delve into more audiobooks in February. Try to get through more of my audiobooks and stuff and get through those. I was going to listen to some. I ended up finding some historical romances that are available on my Everand, which is my audiobook app. So I'm going to delve into those ones so I can get through them a little bit quicker. That way, it's easier for me to get through an audiobook than a physical book. And I noticed that I told my husband, I said, I think the reason why it's harder for me to get through physical books is because with the Kindle, I can go and make the font bigger. So it makes it easier to read. Where some books you get, the font ends up being smaller, so it's kind of harder to read. So when I'm reading with my glasses, it tends to tire my eyes out a lot quicker when it comes to a physical book. Where if I'm reading my Kindle, most times I'm reading my Kindle, I'm not wearing my glasses. So it's easier for me to get through a Kindle book because of the font, the style of the font. And I noticed that, yeah, when something's small, it strains my eyes a lot quicker, and I can't read as much. So, yeah, I think that's probably the reason why I'm able to get through Kindle books a lot quicker than I can physical books. So, if I can find the book on audio, I try to get through it that way too, either through ebook or through audio, just so I could physically get through it quicker. Read it much faster. Otherwise, when I was reading the book, I was physically reading this book, and I was like, oh, it's taking me longer to get through this. So when it comes to my historical, the one I'm reading now, I was physically reading it, and then I went and was like, I need to delve into the ebook, and an ebook it's much easier for me to read. Because like I said, you could change the font and make the font bigger, and it makes it much easier to get through the book. So I think that's what I'm having. That's the issue I'm having as I'm aging, because I am nearsighted, where I could see things up close. I have to wear my glasses all the time because of the distance. Like, I can't see stuff in the distance. So where my husband, he's farsighted. He doesn't need to wear glasses all the time. He just needs them for reading. But he doesn't like using his reading glasses, probably with the same thing I have, where it kind of like strains your eyes after a while, and you get kind of like, it's harder to get through a book that way when your eyes are getting all strained and your eyes are getting tired. So he listens to audiobooks all the time. He can get through audiobooks much quicker that way. So he'll go and he'll listen, but he definitely doesn't get through audiobooks as quick as I do. I could sit there for how many hours and listen to an audiobook, especially if like my daughters are at school and there's really not much I'm doing. I can go and wash the dishes and listen to an audiobook. I can go and vacuum my carpet, and listen to the audiobook. I can go and sit there and I'm painting and listen to an audiobook. There's multiple things I can do with an audiobook, it makes it much easier for me. So that's what I plan on doing for February, is trying to get through more audiobooks. I have some audiobooks that I've saved that I can read, so I'm going to be doing that. And I'll try to get through, like I said, every month, try to get through at least 1 or 2 books that are non-romance related, and then get through some more historical romances and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video here. I think I did pretty good this month. I mean, obviously I had a good amount of DNFs as well, but I think I did pretty good. My average is probably around at least maybe 9 or 10 books a month. Sometimes I could do more. It all depends on the size of the book. If the book is not that long, you can get through it quicker, you know? So yeah, but that's it for this video here. Let me know what you read this month that is a favorite of yours. But yeah, that's it for this video. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I'll see you all on the next video. All right, bye.